My husband believed her for 3 years. 3 years of lies wrapped so carefully in sweetness that I almost believed them too. And then, one video, just 40 seconds long, tore that whole fabricated world apart. My name is Claire, and before I tell you what that video showed, I need you to understand who I was before I found it. Because the woman I am now, telling you this story, is not the woman who lived through it. I was married to Daniel for 11 years. 11 years that I would have sworn on anything sacred to me were built on trust. We met in our 20s, back when life still felt like it had endless doors waiting to be opened. He was steady, quiet in a way that felt safe, not distant. He noticed things, the way I'd go quiet when I was stressed, the way I liked my coffee just slightly too strong. Small things, the things you don't realize you're grateful for until they're gone. We had 2 children. Mia, who was 9, all gap-toothed grins and endless questions. And Noah, 6, who still climbed into our bed some mornings like the world outside our door didn't exist yet. I worked part-time from home, doing freelance bookkeeping for a handful of small businesses. Daniel managed operations at a logistics company across town. Our life wasn't extraordinary. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours. And I loved it fiercely, the way you love something you built with your own hands. Then Vanessa started working with him. I remember the first time he mentioned her name. It was over dinner, some Tuesday in early spring. He said it so casually. Vanessa joined the team. She's sharp, really good with the clients, that I didn't think twice. Why would I? Coworkers came and went. Names passed through our conversations like weather reports. Unremarkable. But names have a way of returning, and Vanessa's kept returning. Vanessa handled the Ashford account today, saved us a nightmare. Vanessa's staying late again. Poor thing, her manager's a mess. Vanessa said the funniest thing at lunch. I want to be honest with you. I wasn't the jealous type. I never checked his phone, never scrolled through his messages when he stepped out of the room. I trusted him the way you trust gravity without thinking about it, without needing proof. So when her name kept surfacing, I told myself it meant nothing. Coworkers talk. Coworkers become friends. That's normal. That's healthy, even. Looking back now, I think that's exactly what she counted on. My trust. My refusal to be the kind of woman who suspects everything. She built her lies on the foundation of my own good faith. It started small. Late nights that stretched a little longer than they used to. A phone that stayed face down on the counter instead of wherever it usually landed. Daniel laughing at something on his screen, and when I asked what was funny, just saying, "Oh, nothing, work thing," and locking the screen before I could see. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But noticing and confronting are 2 very different things. And I kept choosing not to confront, because some small, frightened part of me already sensed that asking the question might give me an answer I wasn't ready to hold. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from lying next to someone every night and feeling the distance between you grow wider without a single word being said. That was my winter that year. Daniel physically there, his side of the bed still dipping under his weight, his coffee mug still in the sink every morning, but somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't follow. I asked him once, gently, if everything was okay between us. He looked at me like the question confused him. Of course, why would you even ask that? I don't know, I said. You just feel far away lately. He reached over and squeezed my hand. I've just been stressed with work. Vanessa's helping me manage some of the load. Actually, she's been a lifesaver. There it was again. Her name offered up like an explanation, like proof that everything was fine. And because I wanted so badly for everything to be fine, I let it be enough. Mia was the one who first said something that lodged itself under my skin and wouldn't leave. It was a Saturday afternoon. She was doing homework at the kitchen table, and I was folding laundry nearby, half listening to her hum some song from school. Then, without looking up from her worksheet, she said, "Is Vanessa Daddy's friend from work?" My hand stopped moving. "Yes, sweetheart, why?" He was texting her at my soccer game. He showed me a picture of her dog. It's really cute, it's a corgi. I forced my voice to stay light. "That's nice, baby." But something in me had shifted. Daniel showing our 9-year-old daughter photos from a coworker's phone, at a soccer game, on a Saturday. It wasn't damning on its own. I told myself that. I told myself that over and over as I finished folding the laundry with hands that had gone slightly unsteady. That night, I lay awake long after Daniel's breathing had slowed into sleep, staring at the ceiling, replaying every mention of her name over the past months. Vanessa said. Vanessa thinks. Vanessa laughed. It was like watching a puzzle assemble itself in the dark, pieces I hadn't even realized I'd been collecting. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself this was the story of every insecure wife who let her imagination run wild over nothing. I didn't want to be that woman. I didn't want to be the wife who blew up her marriage over a coworker's name mentioned one too many times. So I did what so many of us do when we're afraid of the truth. I buried the feeling. I smiled through dinners. I asked about his day. I kissed him goodnight. And underneath all of it, quietly, a small crack had opened in the foundation of everything I believed about my life. Weeks passed like that. Daniel's phone became more private. He started taking calls in the garage, door shut, voice low. When I asked who it was, he'd say, "Just work," with a tone that discouraged follow-up questions. I stopped asking. Not because I stopped wondering, but because some instinct in me had started preparing for something I wasn't ready to name. Then came the company anniversary party. Daniel's office held one every year, a modest gathering at a hotel banquet hall, spouses invited, mediocre catering, forced small talk. I almost didn't go that year. I told him I had a headache. But something pulled me to go anyway, some quiet voice insisting I needed to see this for myself. I saw her the moment we walked in. Vanessa was laughing at something near the bar, head tilted back, dark hair catching the light. She was beautiful in an effortless way, the kind of beauty that doesn't need to try. And when Daniel's eyes found her across the room, something passed over his face that I hadn't seen directed at me in longer than I wanted to admit. He introduced us. She shook my hand warmly, said all the right things. "I've heard so much about you, Claire. Your kids sound wonderful." And I smiled and said all the right things back, while some part of me stood outside my own body, watching this scene unfold like a stranger. Later that night, I watched them from across the room, deep in conversation, her hand briefly touching his arm as she laughed at something he said. It was nothing. It was everything. I couldn't tell anymore which one was true. I didn't say anything on the drive home. Daniel asked if I'd had a good time, and I said yes, because what else do you say when your whole body is humming with a dread you can't yet name? It was 3 weeks later that I found the video. I wasn't looking for it. I want you to understand that. I wasn't some woman secretly combing through her husband's phone every night, hunting for evidence of betrayal. I was simply trying to find a photo, one specific photo of Noah's birthday party from the shared cloud album we both used, so I could send it to my mother. And that's when I saw the folder. Hidden 3 subfolders deep, labeled with something so mundane, so deliberately boring, that anyone else would have scrolled right past it. But I opened it. My fingers moved before my mind caught up to what I was doing. Inside was a single video file, 41 seconds long. My thumb hovered over it for a long moment. Some part of me already knew, with the certainty of a held breath before a fall, that once I pressed play, there would be no unknowing what I was about to see. The video was shaky, filmed from inside a car. Daniel's voice came through first, low and warm in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in longer than I wanted to admit. "Say it again," he said, laughing. And then Vanessa's voice, close to the camera, smiling. "I love you too, you idiot." The video ended with him leaning toward her, the screen going dark just before whatever came next. 41 seconds. That was all it took to end 11 years. I don't remember how long I sat there afterward. I remember the phone growing warm in my hand from being gripped too tightly. I remember Noah calling from the living room, asking if he could have a snack, and answering him in a voice that didn't sound like mine, steady and calm, while everything inside me had gone up in flames. I didn't confront Daniel that night. I know that surprises people when I tell this part, but I needed to understand what I was looking at before I let him talk his way around it. So I waited. I watched him kiss me goodnight, watched him fall asleep beside me like nothing in the world was wrong, and I lay there in the dark building the courage I would need for the morning. I confronted him on a Sunday. The kids were at my sister's for a sleepover, which meant we had the house and the silence entirely to ourselves. I set my phone on the kitchen table between us. The video paused on its first frame, and I said, "I need you to explain this to me." He went very still. I watched the color drain slowly from his face as he understood exactly what I was asking. "Claire, I can explain." "Then explain." My voice didn't shake. I remember being surprised by that, by how calm I sounded while every part of me was breaking. He was quiet for a long moment, and then, in a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he said, "It happened gradually. I didn't plan for it to happen. She listened. She made me feel like I mattered again." "You matter to me," I said. "You've always mattered to me." "I know." He wouldn't look at me. "I know that now. But somewhere along the way, I convinced myself you didn't need me the way you used to, that you had the kids, your work, your whole life figured out, and she made me feel needed." I sat with that for a moment, the cruelty of it settling slowly into my chest, because I had needed him. I had needed him every single day, in 1,000 small ways he'd simply stopped noticing. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything before his words did. "A year, maybe a little more." A year, 12 months of bedtime stories he'd read to our children with a secret sitting behind his eyes. 12 months of anniversaries and ordinary Tuesdays and quiet mornings where I had trusted him completely while he was somewhere else entirely. I didn't cry in front of him. I want you to know that. I saved the crying for later, alone in the bathroom with the shower running loud enough to hide it, because some stubborn piece of my pride refused to let him see exactly how deeply he'd cut me. The weeks that followed are hard to describe in order, because grief doesn't move in order. It moves in waves, in ambushes. One moment I'd be making Mia's lunch, perfectly fine, and the next I'd be gripping the counter because a memory of some ordinary Tuesday had surfaced and revealed itself, in hindsight, as a lie. Daniel moved into a rental across town. We agreed, at least, to tell the children something age-appropriate and gentle, something that didn't require them to carry the full weight of what their father had done. Mia took it hardest. She was old enough to feel the absence but too young to understand it, and some nights I'd find her sitting by the front window, waiting for a car that wasn't coming. "Is Daddy coming back?" she asked me once, her voice so small it nearly broke me in half. "I don't know yet, baby," I told her, because I refused to lie to her the way I had been lied to. "But I promise you, whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere." I won't pretend the anger didn't consume me for a while. There were nights I sat in my car outside Vanessa's apartment building, engine off, just staring up at whichever window I imagined might be hers, wondering what kind of person builds a life on someone else's ruins. I never got out of the car. I never confronted her. I think some part of me knew that whatever I said to her wouldn't change anything that had already happened. The betrayal wasn't hers to answer for. It was his. Daniel tried, in the months that followed, to explain himself further, to apologize in ways that felt less like accountability and more like a plea for absolution. "I made a mistake," he told me once, over coffee, in the strange, formal way we now had to schedule time to talk. "I know I don't deserve it, but I want to fix this. I want us to fix this." "There's no fixing 11 years of trust broken by choice," I told him. "You didn't fall into this, Daniel. You chose it again and again for over a year." He didn't have an answer for that. I don't think there was one. It took months, but slowly, the sharpest edges of the grief began to dull into something more like sadness, something I could carry without it constantly cutting me. I started sleeping again. I started noticing small good things, Noah's laugh, the way sunlight fell across the kitchen table in the mornings, without immediately being ambushed by pain. I filed for divorce in early autumn. It wasn't a dramatic decision made in anger. By the time I signed the papers, the anger had mostly burned itself out, leaving behind something quieter and more resolute. I simply couldn't build a future on a foundation I now knew had been cracked for over a year while I stood on top of it, believing it was solid. Daniel didn't fight the divorce. I think, in his own way, he understood he'd forfeited the right to. He asked, near the end, if there was any version of this where I could forgive him. I already have, I told him, and I meant it, in the quiet way forgiveness sometimes arrives, not as a gift to the person who hurt you, but as a release for yourself. But forgiving you doesn't mean rebuilding what you broke. Some things once shattered don't go back together the way they were. The children adjusted, slowly, the way children do, with more resilience than we ever give them credit for. Daniel remained in their lives, picking them up on weekends, showing up to school events, doing the quiet work of trying to be a good father even after failing so completely at being a faithful husband. I never told them the full truth of what happened. Some things belong only to the adults who lived them. As for Vanessa, I heard through mutual acquaintances that the relationship with Daniel didn't survive the divorce. I felt no satisfaction in that, only a tired kind of clarity, the understanding that people who build relationships on someone else's wreckage rarely build anything that lasts. It's been 2 years now since that night I pressed play on a 41-second video and watched my whole life rearrange itself. I won't tell you the pain is entirely gone, because grief like that leaves a quiet residue that never fully disappears. But I rebuilt. Slowly, deliberately, the way you rebuild anything worth having. I learned something in the wreckage of that marriage, something I carry with me now like a small, hard-won stone in my pocket. Trust isn't naive. Trust is brave. And even when it's broken by someone who didn't deserve it, it doesn't mean you were foolish for offering it. It means you were capable of loving without armor, without suspicion, without constantly guarding your own heart. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength some people never manage to have at all. Some nights when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep, I think about that video. 41 seconds that ended one life and, without my knowing it then, began another. I don't hate the person that video revealed him to be. I simply stopped waiting for him to become someone else. Because sometimes the most painful truths are also the ones that finally set you free. I pressed play anyway,